Hello, friends! We have been learning about our five senses. Our five senses are seeing with our eyes, smelling with our nose, tasting with our mouth and tongue, hearing with our ears, and touching with our hands. That's five senses. Today, we are reading the story of Little Red Riding Hood. Little Red had to use all five of her senses to tell that her grandma was not who she thought she was. The title of this story is Little Red. The author who wrote the story is Pam Shiller. The illustrator who drew the pictures is Diana Magnum. Once upon a time, in a town not far away, there lived a sweet little girl and her mother. The little girl's mother made her daughter a beautiful hat from red wool. It suited the little girl so well that she wore it every day. For that reason, everyone called her Little Red. One day, her mother told Little Red that her grandmother was sick in bed with a cold. She handed her a basket to take to her grandmother. In the basket, there was a jar with soup, fruit, and bread. Little Red set out immediately to go to her grandmother who lived across town. To get there, she had to go through the woods. On her way, she met with a wolf. The wolf asked Little Red where she was going. Not knowing that the wolf was dangerous, she answered, "I'm going to see my grandmother, who lives behind the movie theater." "Well," said the wolf, "I'll go and see her too. I'll go this way if you go that way, and we will see who gets there first." Little Red took her time. She stopped to smell the pretty dandelions. She listened to the singing and chirping of birds. She lay down and watched the clouds dance across the sky. Little Red loved the way the sun felt on her face. She sat down on a rock and ate one of the apples that her mother had placed in the basket. The crisp, tart taste of the fruit filled her mouth with the nicest sensations. The wolf, instead, ran as fast as he could, and since he also took the shortest path, he arrived at Grandmother's house well ahead of Little Red. He knocked at the door. Tap, tap, tap. "Who's there?" cried Grandmother from her bed. "It's me, Little Red," replied the wolf, disguising his voice. The grandmother was delighted that her granddaughter had come to see her. She said, "Come in, sweet child," without looking out the window to make sure it was her granddaughter. She didn't use her sense of sight to keep her safe. The wolf opened the door and immediately grabbed the grandmother, tied her up, and tossed her in the closet. And then he took one of her nightgowns, put it on, and climbed into her bed. He waited for the arrival of Little Red. After some time, Little Red knocked on the door. Tap, tap, tap. "Who's there?" cried the wolf again, disguising his voice. Little Red, hearing the big voice of the wolf, was worried. She thought to herself, "That cold must have made Grandmother's voice hoarse." She used her sense of hearing to know that something wasn't right. "It's your granddaughter, Little Red," the wolf cried out to her. "Come in, sweet child." Little Red opened the door and headed straight to her grandmother's bedside. As she got close to the bed, she was frightened. Her grandmother didn't look like herself. Her cold had made her eyes look strange, and her nose was several times its normal size. She was using her sense of sight to see that this didn't look like her grandmother. Thinking that her grandmother's ears must also be stopped up, she moved in closer and said in a loud voice, "Grandmother, you don't look like yourself. What big eyes you have! All the better to see you with, my dear." Thinking her grandmother might be able to see her very well, Little Red moved in a little closer. She noticed the grandmother's sweet powder smell was missing. She noticed it didn't smell like her grandmother. Grandmother, you don't smell like yourself. It's the eucalyptus I use for my cold, dear. Little Red reached for her grandmother's hand, but the wolf's paws did not feel like her grandmother's soft hand. It was rough and coarse. She used her sense of touch to see that the wolf did not feel like her grandmother. Immediately, Little Red let go. She moved in closer and surveyed her grandmother's face more carefully. Grandmother, what big ears you have. All the better to hear you with, my child. Grandmother, what big teeth you have. All the better to eat you up, growled the wolf as he jumped from the bed and attempted to grab Little Red. Little Red jumped away in the nick of time. Thankfully, the wolf got all tangled up in grandmother's nightgown. He tripped and fell flat on the floor, bumping his head as he hit the ground. He was knocked out. Little Red pulled out her cell phone from her pocket cape and dialed 911. After she told the operator what had happened, she began to look for her grandmother. She glanced around the room. Her grandmother was nowhere in sight. She sniffed the air. She tried to use her sense of smell. There was no hint of grandmother's sweet powder, only the smell of eucalyptus. Little Red stood still and listened quietly in hopes of hearing her grandmother. Aha! What was that? She heard some knocking. She used her sense of hearing. She used her eyes to follow the sound and ended up by grandmother's closet. She opened the door and there was grandmother. Little Red untied her, hugged her, and helped her back to her bed. As Little Red watched the animal obedience school officer haul the wolf out to the wagon, she thought to herself, I sure learned an important lesson today. I will always trust my senses. The wolf did not sound like my grandmother. He didn't look like my grandmother. He didn't smell like my grandmother, and he did not feel like my grandmother. He was an imposter. My senses told me that. The end. Today, we are going to practice using our 5 senses. One way that we can use our 5 senses is by popping popcorn. Popcorn is great because it makes a sound as it cooks and it smells good. So to start, I'm going to put these small kernels in my popcorn maker. Now, if you look at them right now, they are small and smooth. We are going to stick them in our popcorn maker. We are going to see how they change. We're going to use all 5 of our senses. Oh, it sounds loud. It feels hot. It's very hot. Ooh, it's hot, hot, hot. I'm going to write that it feels hot. And it looks small. It smells like butter. And I am looking to see if my popcorn is expanding. Not yet. As I'm looking at it, I am seeing that it is getting bigger. As I'm hearing it, it's pretty loud. And I'm seeing that it's starting to pop, pop, pop. It's changing. Look at that. It is a different shape now. to unplug it so we can hear it pop, pop, popping. Listen close. Do you hear it? It goes pop and it expands. Popcorn sounds like pop, pop. That's how popcorn sounds. So it started out looking smooth and small. And then it expanded to become a big piece of popcorn. It started out as a small seed and it got bigger and became a big piece of popcorn. That's called expansion. We used all 5 of our senses except we haven't tasted it yet. Let's see what it tastes like. I love the way popcorn tastes. I hope you guys do too. It tastes yummy. I'm going to write yummy. At home, you can try cooking your food and writing down what it looks like, what it sounds like as you cook the food, what it smells like, what it feels like, and what it tastes like. Thank you guys. Happy Friday!